Hello, I'm Ruby, and today we're looking at my classic constructed Guardian deck. We're looking at this deck in three ways. First is the core deck. These are the cards you're playing in every single matchup. Second is the sideboard options. These are the cards you're playing in some matchups. And third are our flex cards. These are cards that are not part of your core game plan, and you can interchange some of these cards to make your deck be more offensive or defensive depending on how you want to tune your deck. For example, if your meta has a lot of warrior, you might want to play more defensive, and if your meta has a lot of mechanologist, you might want to play more offensive. Before we get started, if you'd like to support me, please use the link down in the description on your next FaB Foundry order. I intend to make more of this strategy focused content. I already have made a gameplay video of me playing Guardian in my grand final game of the Tabletop Simulator Ladder League. And I've also written an article on how to approach every single matchup and how to sideboard for them. I'll provide links for those down in the description. Without further ado, let's get into the deck. Starting with our weapon and equipment, so every single matchup we're using Anthos. We're not playing Sledge of Anvilheim in Classic Constructed. I think that's a card that's only good in Blitz, and even there, I'm not a huge fan of it. In our physical matchups, we are running everything that's not Null Rune and not Goliath Gauntlet. The one matchup we're running Goliath Gauntlet in is actually the Dash matchup. Now, I go more into depth about the Dash matchup in my article. Basically, we have to be the aggressors in that matchup, and we can't play our usual grindy control role as Guardian. And another interesting thing about Goliath Gauntlet and Mage Master Boots in the Dash matchup is how these two equipments pair with Forged for War. Basically, they're not going to get -1 counter from blocking. So in the Dash matchup, if you have Forge for War out, every time that Dash breaks the combat chain, which is usually very likely with her items or pistol, you're going to be able to block with your Mage Master Boots or Goliath Gauntlet again for free every time the combat chain is broken. So in the Wizard matchup, we're playing 3 Null Runes, keeping in our chest plate. The reason for that is, while the armor on the chest plate isn't relevant, the Surging Strike tokens do come into play versus Wizard, especially for setting up your turns for a big attack. And in the in the Rune Blade matchup, we're playing 1 Arcane, and that's going to be your Null Rune Hood. Basically, your Crater Fist, obviously your chest, and your boots are the most important, and your Skull Cap is the least important to your game plan. So onto the core deck. Like I was saying, we're breaking this down into 3 sections. So the first section is the core deck. So I've already separated out. On the right, you'll see the sideboard. Right now we're focusing on the cards on the left. These are the cards that you're playing in every single matchup. So starting with our Reds, Command and Conquer. It's just an all-around great card. I don't need to say too much about it. The one reason why it's so good in Guardian is that defense reactions are especially strong against Guardian, preventing our large crush attacks. And what Command Conquer does is it punishes your opponent for playing maybe too many defense reactions, or at the least, it puts pressure on defense reactions in their arsenal that would otherwise be preventing your Crippling Crush or other big attacks from getting off. So 1 Sigil of Solace. I actually used to run 3, and if you're trying to play more defensive of a game plan, then it's fine to run 3. The reason I'm only running 1 is because it doesn't block for anything, it doesn't attack for anything. Yes, it's good at what it does, but sometimes I found that I wanted my second and third copies of Sigil and Solace to actually be something that was impactful, like at least a card that can block, or, ideally a red card, because Sigil is taking up a red slot, which are supposed to be your power cards. So sometimes I would want Sigil of Solace to be a more powerful card. So that's why I've cut it down from 3 to 2. Tome of Fiendal, we don't need to go too much into that. That's the one card you're playing with your Mage Master Boots. important to note that your Mage Master Boots can synergize with not only Tome of Fiendal in your deck, they can also synergize with Stamp Authority and Showtime because they're both non-attack actions. But 99 out of 100 times you're using your Mage Master Boots on your Tome of Fiendals. So let's go to the blues that you're running in every single matchup. First thing to note is that Guardian plays 40 blues generally. Sometimes you sideboard down to 37 blues in a matchup, but you are always have a very high density of blues. This gives you defense in the arcane matchups, and it gives you assurance that you're going to be able to pay for your expensive weapon or your expensive attacks. So this is a pretty standard set of 40 blues. You'll see that I have a couple blues here in the sideboard, but right now we're just going to look at the core blues. The one thing that almost all these blues have in common is they cost 3 or more, and they block for 3. So costing 3 or more obviously synergizes with your weapon, Anothos, and I go into my gameplay analysis video on you actually want to block with the cards that don't cost 3 early game, so that late game all the cards in your deck are going to synergize with your weapon. So the 2 blue cards that cost less than 3 and do not synergize with your weapon, keep in mind we have to, if we're playing cards that don't synergize with their weapon, cost less than 3, we have to have a reason for doing so. So first off is Blessing of Deliverance. This is just a integral strategy for Guardian. It gives you a little possibly life gain, and it can possibly, when you play this card, let's say you play Blessing with a blue and you draw a card, so now you have replaced Blessing and you have 1 resource floating, so you're actually gaining a resource advantage that turn. So Blessing just helps us with our Guardian's game plan. The other card that costs less than 3 is my 2 Emerging Dominance. Very few games do I actually get to set this up, but it's a nice option to have in there. Like I said, we have to be strict on the cards that don't synergize with Anothos that are blue, but Emerging Dominance meets that requirement that it's still a good enough card, even costing only 2, that it's going to help us with our game plan. Crippling Crush, I don't have to say much. It should be in every single matchup. It's our best card. And just a note about Crippling Crush and with Remembrance, that's the main target you're going for your Remembrance. If you're running 2 Remembrance, sometimes you can get away with shuffling back a Command Conquer and 1 Crippling Crush and a Spinal Crush or something else. But and then if you have a second Remembrance, then you can rely on that to get your 3 Crippling Crush back late game. But if you're only running 1 Remembrance in a matchup, let's say versus Ninja, that's so aggressive we don't have the opportunity to get off 2 Remembrances, you have to really be specific in that you're getting back your Crippling Crushes. If you're using your 1 single Remembrance in the game to get back your Command Conquers or your less impactful red cards, then you're doing yourself a disservice. Your Crippling Crush is there for when you're able to switch on the opponent from your defensive to offensive role and then start gaining tempo. So now that's the core deck. Let's go into the sideboard options. So the first thing you'll notice with our sideboard options is our 8 defense reactions, 8 red defense reactions, plus our 3 unmovables. So we're running a total of 11 defense reactions. So like I said, I have an article that goes into specifics on each matchup in your sideboarding, so we're not going to go into those matchups. I recommend you read that article to get more information. So your sideboard, your defense reactions are obviously for when you're playing defensive role, which is a lot of matchups. Righteous Cleansing is an interesting card. I actually just bumped it up to 3. I was playing only 2 before. It costs the same amount as Crippling Crush, different pitch costs, but the on-hit effect is so different So sometimes the Righteous Cleansing, the on-hit effect is just not impactful enough. Sure, it's relevant that you get some information and you can mess up your opponent's strategy if you order their deck in the wrong way. But since Righteous Cleansing doesn't give me an immediate effect, I'm not playing it every single matchup just because it's not part of my core game plan. And another thing to note about Guardian in this deck list, you'll notice I'm playing very few yellows. I'm only playing, a total of 5 yellows. 1, 2, 3 Righteous Cleansing, 2 Remembrance, and 1 Tome of Fiendal. And a Forge for War. 6 yellows. That's it out of my list. Yellows just don't really synergize with Guardian. The hammer cost, your weapon costs 3, and your impactful attacks are so expensive. That's why we run such a heavy density of blues. So we have 1 Remembrance that you're always going to play in every single matchup. Now the second Remembrance is only coming in versus matchups that you can afford to play a second Remembrance and loop your Crippling Crushes from the graveyard. Like I alluded to before, again, the Ninja matchup, Ninja is generally so aggressive. Obviously, unless you're playing Control Ninja, but generally, Ninja is so aggressive that you don't have time to afford to get off 2 Remembrances. So we're only running 1. I believe there's another matchup where you only run 1. I don't remember off the top of my head, but look at my article to find what other matchups you're only playing 1 Remembrance in. So on our attack reactions, these are our 6 attack reactions in the entire deck. So the reason that these are sideboard is, first off, they all block for 2. In the Warrior matchup, which is where I take these cards out, you really need cards that block for 3. You just can't afford running cards that block for 2. You need to have the best defense that you possibly can. And in the Warrior matchup, for instance, you can't get off your pummels reliably because it requires a setup cost. And Warrior, similar to Ninja, is getting off so much damage and aggression on you that for you to be able to have a hand that has, let's say, a Command Conquer and a pummel, you need a lot of resources to pull that off. And that probably means you're going to have to not forego blocking and take a lot of damage. That's something we can't risk in Guardian. So some matchups we're taking out the pummel and the lunging press just because of the setup cost and for the low defense value. Now, unmovable, same for our red defense reactions. We take out our unmovable where defense reactions just are not relevant or part of our game plan. For example, the dash matchup, we take out every single defense reaction and try to just be as aggressive as we can. We cannot afford to let them go to the late game and give them the chance to get all their items out. They have a better late game than we do at that point. So that's an example when we take unmovable out. Spinal Crush. So let's look at these cards together. Our 3 impactful red attack cards, Spinal Crush, Mangle, and 1 Disable. Now, they just basically have different applications. Spinal Crush, look at the art. he's breaking the spine of a ninja. So obviously that's great against decks like Dash or Ninja that utilize Go Again. And Mangle, so a good example of when you're going to use Mangle over Spinal Crush. Let's look at the Warrior matchup. Spinal Crush, it's relevant on hit effect against Warrior. Warrior does generally have a lot of Go Again attacks, especially if you're playing a Warrior deck that is going wide and uses Go Again. But like I was talking about with Pummel, it's a big setup cost. It's a very big setup cost for you to pull off. So, it costs 5, so you'd have to be able to, let's say you play it from Arsenal and you have a Surging token that you created the turn prior, you need a minimum of 2 cards to be able to pull that off and have made a Surging token the turn prior. That's just such a high cost to set up reliably that we can't afford it. And Mangle, in the same situation, it's coming from Arsenal. You have a Surging Strike token on the field. You only need 1 card to pull off that Mangle. 3 resources to play for a card that comes in for 8 and has a very scary on-hit effect. So just keep that in mind when you're sideboarding. There would be time when I was, I know when I was starting Guardian, I was thinking, why am I taking out Spinal Crush? It's going to be good in this matchup. But you'll see as you get more experience with the deck on why you can forego playing cards that are good to have a more defensive strategy. Now disable. This is one of the flex cards I was talking about. This is my personal edition. You could put another Sigil of Solace. You could put a third Command Conquer. You could put a lot in this slot instead than a disable like I have. So this is just to add some more offensive possibilities for my deck. Guardian is such a defensive deck, but sometimes I'm playing a matchup where I need to be the aggressor, and disable helps me do that. It has a great cost similar to Spinal Crush. If I'm able to set up a Surging Strike token and set it up in the arsenal, then I only need 2 blue cards from hand to be able to play disable with dominate. So looking at some flex cards. So for flex cards, we're not going to be messing with our core deck on the left side here. For flex cards, we're just going to be looking at some cards on the right. And your own mileage may vary. I'm not saying I'm a Guardian master. I'm just trying to impart my experience to help expedite and improve the rate at which you're increase the rate at which you're improving your Guardian. My goal for this guide is to just make you a better player faster. I had to take a lot of hours to study and test myself, and I want to help players get all this information and get there way quicker than I was able to. So for flex cards, I wouldn't take out Fate Foreseen or Sink Belows. I think those are, while they're not part of your core deck and played in every single matchup, I still think they're part of your core overall deck, in that I wouldn't take them out at this time in this meta. I like them so much. Staunch Response, I could see going down to 1 or even 0 be correct. It's such a defensive card. It's sometimes too defensive for what it's doing. It's like way too highly defensive. So sometimes that can be a hindrance. And so, if you want to, like I said, if you want to tune your deck to be a little more aggressive, this is a card you could possibly look at to cut to add more, let's say a third Command and Conquer. I'm only running 2. You could add another disable. I'm only running 1. So those are examples I'm talking about. Righteous Cleansing, like I went over before. Interesting card. Definitely powerful, but that on-hit effect, that's the main thing I'm looking at. Since that on-hit effect is sometimes not immediately impactful, I don't think it's that great of a card. It is a yellow, so it's not supposed to be that great of a card compared to a red. So I actually just went up to 3 Righteous Cleansing, and I was playing 2 before. I think that both are correct depending on your personal preference and maybe what meta you're expecting. Remembrance, you have to run 2 Remembrance in this deck. No questions about it. I would not recommend taking it out. Forge for War, this is a flex card. So far for flex cards, we've looked at Forge for War, Righteous Cleansing, Red Staunch Response. Forge for War is a flex card in that it's good in the Mechanologist matchup, like I mentioned before. It's also good against Guardian. It's not that good in a lot of other matchups. So, and also, like we were talking about the blues, cards that pitch for 3 and block for 3, so important in Guardian. Blocking for 3, just because that's part of Guardian's game plan, usually is playing that grindy control style. And 2, Forge for War, it costs 2. It does not directly synergize with our weapon. So that's why it's a flex spot. It's a good card in its own right, but it's very specific. Lunging Press, I personally don't think you should take out this blue Lunging Press, at least one of. I've seen people run up to, more than 1. I know that some people, like I'm talking about tweaking here for flex cards, you could run some potions, Potion of Strength or Potion of Energy. Great card in Guardian. I personally just don't run it because I like cards that block for something. You know, I already have Sigil and Remembrance that block for 0. They don't have any defensive value. So running more potions, it just gives you a little more risk against, say, Warrior or Ninja, where you have to really block correctly to be able to win those matchups. Blue and Movable, I recommend. I think that's a core part of the deck. Spinal Crush, core part of the deck. Mangle, this is a flex spot. I think that some combination of at least 1 you need to play, but 2 to 3 maybe you could get away with. Like I said, this is all meta dependent and personal preference. I could see it being correct to play 1 to 3 Mangle. I would recommend, if you're interchanging any of these red cards, that you interchange them for another red card. You shouldn't be adding more blues. You shouldn't be adding too many yellows like we're talking about. These red cards are so integral to our game plan. So when you exchange a red or exchange a blue, you almost always want to exchange it for whatever you turned out. Okay, well, I think that covers it. Let me know what you think down in the description. Please give me a like and subscribe to this channel. I'm going to be making more high-level content for you guys. This is the type of content that I would like to see. I know when I start a new class that it's very daunting to know, how do I sideboard correctly? How do I approach each matchup? How do I play my cards, and how do I sequence? Do I pitch that strong card and play it late game, or do I go for it early game? How do I master this deck? So the content I'm trying to create is, like I said, to help you increase the rate at which you're improving and cut down all those hours that I already put in to learn this deck and get proficient with it, so that you can take this deck and pick it up quicker and take it to your local armories or win your next tournament online, whatever. I think Guardian's a great class. I hope you enjoy. See you next time.